Glastonbury experience on Six Music today. Talking to somebody who's no stranger to Glastonbury very shortly, Ed O'Brien, Radiohead coming. Comes at you from all angles, that song. Lamacq from EOB, and joining us on the phone, a man who's no stranger to the Glastonbury Festival. Ed O'Brien, evening to you.
Good evening, Steve. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Thank you very much for doing this. I mean, we've got to start with the inescapable question, which is, what have you been up to for the last 3 months?
Funnily enough, not a lot.
But,
I mean, literally, I sort of got knocked out by the virus a bit, and I just sort of done nothing, and sort of it's been actually really good just stopping and deciding what to do next.
And have you reached any conclusions about what to do next?
Yeah, I like making music.
Very good. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you've done this. I don't know if any musicians have done this, or if it's actually too painful. But have you ever been tempted over the course of the last month or so, perhaps, to look up and find out what you would have been doing? Oh, tonight we would have been in Paris. Something like that.
No, but I know exactly what I'd be doing now.
Of course.
I've been in a park teepee field, you know, with a bunch of friends and getting settled in and sort of getting ready to think about the gig tomorrow.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And, I mean, do you count yourself lucky to have at least got in and played live before the lockdown? Or actually, is that almost worse because you were presented with this amazing thing, got the taste for it, and then it was snatched away from you?
No, I feel just very blessed that I was able to get some gigs in. I think I did 6 shows, and I was supremely out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
But there was something about it. It was that last night. It was not the last one, but when we did the Roundhouse for the Six Music, when we were playing Brazil, and it sort of went off a bit, and I was just like, it felt really good, and it was just like gave me a taste of how it can be.
Yeah, yeah. But that's the thing now, and then it's, as I say, then it's snatched away from you until who knows when. And also, weirdly, obviously putting a record out, although, the album obviously came out during lockdown. Went top 20, though. I don't know if chart statistics matter to anyone anymore, whether they matter to you. But, I mean, went top 20, though, didn't it?
I know, it's nice. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think Radiohead have paid attention to a chart placing for years, because we probably had that luxury not to.
Yeah.
But when it's your own, you're like, oh, actually, I quite like it to do all right.
And who did? I always enjoy asking this question, but when you came to the end of making the record, and particularly your record, because obviously that's evolved, it's gestated over many years, and it's so long to evolve, and then, you know, suddenly it presents itself to you. But after making the album, who was the first person outside of the band who you played it to or sent it to?
It's always my wife and my family. They're the first people, and my wife is a great sounding board. Like back in the demo stage, by playing her stuff, she just has a great feel for music, and she's honest as well. But the other person I usually do it to is actually my dad.
Really?
Yeah, he's 79.
Yeah.
And he's been very. I've always played him the Radiohead albums. Like, you know, I'll give you an example. When I played in Pablo Honey, it's just like, there's one good song on there. It's called Creep. And the next song on the Bends, he was like, he came back after he'd listened to it, and he likes to have a few drinks. And he came back the next day and he said, I love this record. You've really moved up. And then when we did OK Computer, I didn't hear anything from him for about a week. And I thought, oh no, he doesn't like it. And I got a very drunken message on my answer phone about a week later saying, I think this is he's called it a masterpiece, whatever. So I kind of intuitively trust his taste. I think it's not an age thing. It's like he just has a very good feel for music.
Yeah, yeah. Mrs. Vocation could have been in A&R.
Well, therein lies another story, not for now.
Okay. You see, and this is the tragedy, isn't it? Because all these collections of stories and things are exactly what you would be telling around a campfire, as you say, this weekend at Glastonbury. That's where all these tales come out, isn't it? And that's where it's because Glastonbury. I don't know about you, but I imagine, obviously being somebody, you know, in a world famous rock band, Glastonbury is still a great leveller.
That's the thing I love about it, isn't it? It's the ultimate level. Like last year, I had a chat with Mark from Idols came up before their set on the Park stage. Oh, I think no, after. And then I saw you because you're a great champion of them. And you just have these great conversations outside of the biz. Everybody's just themselves. And, one moment you're chatting to, a punter, somebody who's a massive Radiohead fan. The next moment you're hanging out with Lars Ulrich wandering through Shangri-La. It's like home. It's like how it should be.
First time, I read this somewhere, first time you went to Glastonbury, which I think was 1990, it was after you'd been to university. But the first time, I think you say in this interview, hadn't really found my festival legs, didn't really get it, didn't really have a great time first time I went.
Yeah. I went because we were graduating that year from Manchester, and I was a huge Mondays fan. And they were headlining on the Friday night, and they were awful. I mean, I love the Mondays, but they were really shambolic.
Right.
And I think it's one of those things, like if you're in I was in a bit of a sort of a downtime in my life when I didn't have a lot of self-confidence, low self-esteem, not feeling good, and then being thrown into Glastonbury, which back then was like Apocalypse Now, and it was kind of overwhelming. But I have to remember that the saving grace was actually the Saturday night in The Cure. I remember sitting there transfixed on the hill watching The Cure play, and it was the most perfect soundtrack. That kind of alienation and loneliness that you can feel at these times with The Cure playing, it was perfect.
Yeah, it's strange. First time I went, I was working. I never went to Glastonbury as a punter. I never went to any festivals as a punter because obviously, festivals were different. I'm a bit older than, a lot of people. So festivals when I was a teenager, Reading Festival was just bikers throwing bottles of urine at each other. And I suppose, Glastonbury at that time was, full of hippie travellers and druids peddling mystical stones, or some people call it the good old days. But it just didn't really seem like my thing. But so the first time I went was 95, and I think it was just too big to get the first time around, and you have to find which bit and where you feel comfortable, and then it all starts making sense.
Yeah, totally. And you have to sort of look after yourself a bit. Know that if you party hard, you've got to sort of eat something the next day and maybe drink some water. And I just didn't have the fundamentals worked out, And I agree, it was my first festival experience, and I wasn't a hippie. And you remember how tribal it was back in those days.
Yeah.
There was the rave scene, which was growing, which was great, and I felt, attached to that, having come from sort of indie land. But you're right, festivals seem to be a sort of a hippie thing or a rocker thing in Reading.
Yeah. You play in 94, I think is the first time Radiohead played, and on an astonishing bill when you look back at it. Who was it? Spiritualised? Was it Spiritualised, Blur? Then you, and before you had been the Inspiral Carpets and Pulp. That's a bill, isn't it? What do you remember of the first time playing then? Were you nervous of going back and playing at this place where you've been not really sort of seen what it means, I suppose?
I don't think we were nervous because we were on really early. We were on at like 2 p.m. So we were just in the middle of a whole touring thing, and we kind of figured that I had the Bends come. No, it was 94. So we were doing a tour to kind of work in new material for the Bends. Mm. So we were just in the groove, really. But what I remember about it was the complete opposite of what I'd experienced in 1990, when it was wet, dark, cold, and it was a glorious sunny one, and we were able to sit on the ground. So I don't really remember too much about that one because it was sort of in the blink of an eye.
Mm. I'm just amazed that Radiohead have played Glastonbury where it hasn't flung it down. 97, of course, is the infamous one. But even now, has there ever been a festival set where the bands were having such where there's such a disconnect between what a great time people are having out front and what an awful time the band are having on stage?
Yeah, it's funny. I read something that Stormzy last year had problems with his monitors, apparently, and he couldn't hear stuff. And I think our experience was probably quite similar. And, it was was just trying to think. I was asked to write something about it, my memories of 97. And my memory of 97 really is trying to support Tom, because this was the biggest gig we'd ever done, and it's probably the biggest gig we've ever done. And the monitors are gone. He couldn't hear what he was singing. None of us could hear what we were playing, but, you know, we're not the front man. And so I just wanted to make sure that he was all right, because if he was all right, then we would get through it. If he wasn't all right, then there was a chance we might go off stage, or we might... and it wasn't until he said that moment when he said, Andy, our lighting designer, said, Andy, can you turn on the lights? And that was the first and probably the only moment of euphoria in that whole evening. It was like, I remember we looked out and like, oh my God, there are people out there. Because the weird thing about the pyramid stage is, it's because it's quite far from the audience. Sometimes it's quite hard to tell whether you can see fires and lights, but when it gets dark, it's quite hard to tell if there's anyone out there. So yeah, it was just one of those things, and like we've always said, we walked off that stage and we thought we'd blown it, you know.
Yeah, but it's now, I mean, it's constantly referred to as one of the greatest Glastonbury sets of all time, isn't it?
Well, I think it was just, we were very emotional. I mean, everything was laid out in that gig. I mean, you know, all five of us gave absolutely everything. And it was interesting because we had a year more touring to do for OK Computer. That was kind of the start. And I think it's almost like it took us a long time to recover from that experience, because everything after that was a bit of a anti-climax. There was just so much adrenaline and emotion in there.
And had you, just out of interest, I don't know if bands do this, but particularly with Glastonbury, you can't do this for every festival that you're going to play, but for something like Glastonbury, had you actually looked at the weather forecast through the week as your heart was sinking, as it just became clear it was getting wetter and wetter and wetter?
Well, I don't know if you remember, but I think it had rained pretty much 2 weeks solidly before the festival. And we stopped off on the way down. I remember we stopped off at one of those like garden centres in sort of Wiltshire, to get wellies and waterproofs, because we were told the bus couldn't get down to the stage, that we were going to have to walk down from the car park at the top. Yeah, I mean, you do now, but in those days, did they have long-range weather forecasts in the 90s? I don't know.
I would have thought even by then you could have twisted your manager to get onto the Met office. They'd have made an exception for you, I would have thought.
Well, we also, like you said, around that time, and we don't so much recently, but we were a bit like that car in the wacky races that went around with a cloud over its head. Everywhere we played, it rained. And we played a couple of weeks before the Royal Dublin Showground outside in Dublin.
Yeah.
And it absolutely chucked it down. So we were sort of used to it, really.
Obviously, after 97, there's... it's 2003 was the hits, did the hits, is that right?
Yeah.
2003. Yeah. Tom's secret set in 2010, another secret set. No, there was nothing secret about the following year's secret set, was there?
Well, I think that's because the Sun announced it, didn't they? They put it in the paper on that Friday morning.
Did they? I didn't know that. Certainly not a big secret. Then 2017, how long did you discuss what you were going to do, or did you just think, well, we'll just go and do what we do? We're the band. Here are our songs. That's what you do. We'll go and play the Pyramid stage, and we'll just do this, and it'll be fine. Or did you have, long soul-searching conversations about what you wanted that gig to be, that performance to be?
We did this great game of pretending it wasn't important, knowing that each one of us, in the previous 6 weeks in the run-up, because we were touring, that was constantly on each of our minds. So what we do, like with us, with Radiohead, the set list changes every night. And what we were trying to do is finesse it to a point whereby, where by the time we got to Glastonbury, you want to be doing your best set. And that really has got to be a greatest hits set. But we didn't do that, did we? And I don't know why. I mean, it's a funny thing. It's like quite a few people have said this to me, and good friends. And I don't know if this was the general consensus, but the vibe that I get was that we sort of went 2-0 down at the beginning. We kind of we were a bit too self-indulgent, a bit down, and then we sort of pulled it back and won 3-2. with the greatest hits, and I just, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. I don't know. It's so hard to do it. It's the biggest gig you'll ever do, and trying to get the set list right is, there is a tendency in Radiohead to be willfully perverse. I don't know if you've noticed, but that's not the time to be willfully perverse.
No, I suppose. But then again, but then on the other hand, I suppose it would be very. I mean, I think people were amazed when you did go and play the hits at one point. Because really, I mean, part of everything about Radiohead is, I suppose, trying to get the audience to meet you part way. You know how you feel with some bands. The band are reaching out to the audience, and they'll do anything they can. They'll go as far as they can to please an audience. But bands that you really like, kind of, you've got to, as an audience, you're expected to try a bit yourself, and the band will try, but you've got to meet them halfway. And I think that's the thing. So that's in my head what Radiohead are.
Absolutely, but you see, in 2009, when we headlined Reading for the one and only time, knowing that it was basically a GCS Leavers festival and it was the kids, we wrote this set and we opened with Creep, and it just went off big time. So, and it was a greatest hit set. So I just think that, I know what you're saying, and that's what we tend to do sometimes. But sometimes as well, it's just, it's like just. Bang, I guess the whole thing is do the unexpected. If the unexpected is to do a greatest hits, do that.
Yeah. All these lessons learned over the years. We're going to play actually a track from 2017, a version of one of those hits in a second. Have you got the bug now though for writing? And are you already thinking? I mean, there's a lot of life left in Earth, the album, but are you already thinking? I've got a few ideas for another one.
Yeah, I was kind of at the end of the whole process and the releasing of a record. You suddenly start seeing the warts, the shortcomings of it. And I'm always not constantly, but when you finish a project like that, or music, I think it's important to sort of go, well, what do you want to do now? Oh, actually, I want to go and do gardening for a year or something. And I think the thing is to be really honest. And then, like I've always said about music, it's like you have to tell the truth in music. So I had to get to the point when I'm like, I really want to do this. And I really did a bit of soul searching and said, well, I've done it. I've done one album. Do I want to do it again? And it was just like, I really, really, really want to do it. And I kind of have a feeling of where I want to go.
Well, let's face it. If your dad thinks you should do another one, do another one.
Yeah, exactly.
Ed, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for sparing us some time, and good luck. And hopefully we will see you somewhere, even if it's a field this time next year. But take care of yourself, mate.
Thanks, Steve. You too.